Welcome to MixLogic Agency. My name is Mike Jones, and I am the founder, the CEO of MixLogic. And today, what I'm doing, and really for the whole month of February, I'm going to be focusing on prominent Black bartenders that a lot of us are not aware of during the 19th century, here to honor Black History Month. All right. Now, just a little bit about myself. I started my journey down the road of the beverage industry around 2010. I've been in it now for about a decade, and I worked at many top restaurants all across Atlanta, Georgia, here in the United States. Uh, and I worked with many top bars and restaurants. Um, some of the things I've done is joined the United States Bartenders Guild, Atlanta chapter, which is very big in my development as a bartender. Also, I worked under prominent food and beverage programs down in Atlanta, where I had some of the best mentors. Also, I began to study wine uh, and studied the Certified Specialist Wine exam. I went on to competing in a few national craft cocktail competitions where I've won two. 2013, won down at Tales of the Cocktail and the sidecar competition held by Merlot Cognac, based out of Cognac, France. And also in 2017, went on to win that same competition for the second time, being the first to win two in San Francisco, the July of 2017. Um, and currently now, I've moved back from Atlanta after 16 years, and I came back to my hometown, Dayton, Ohio, to sit and open up and also help to progress the food and beverage industry here in Dayton, Ohio. My whole philosophy is that I feel like if you go away to learn, to pick up your skills, to come back and help to build your community. And I think this is the perfect time to sit and talk about um, just different figures behind the area of activity that I operate in, which is the beverage industry. And we're going to do that by first beginning with probably the first man that I learned about who was a black man in America to be noted for being one of the best bartenders of his time, which is Cato Alexander. Before even hopping into Cato Alexander, a lot of people, when they see me behind the bar, they always ask, "How did I come to doing these things?" And I mean, when do you know that you're the best, or how do I become a bartender like yourself? And to be honest, it's a loaded question because I can't just point out the very first thing that I've done. Like, I mean, I can talk about all of the programs I went through in Dayton, Ohio, coming up as a kid with my education. Going to Dayton Catholic Elementary School, going to Fairview Middle School, going to Chaminade Julienne Catholic High School, and then matriculating down to Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. But I always sum it up into saying that doing these things all require some part of excellence. There's no program that I've been a part of that didn't require you to be at your best. And I was told a quote coming up in this industry: how you do anything is how you do everything. So I took that to heart. So everything that I've done has always been to the max, wanting to know how deep I have to go, getting under the right people, getting under those who are passionate about what they do, wanting to be with the number one program, wanting to be around the number one bartender and such, researching, studying, reading every night, going home, cooking, reading about food, studying produce. Everything that I've done is revolved around anthropology and history. And when Cato Alexander, as much as others, like Edna Lewis, led me to really getting into finding Black Americans who have been involved in this culture that we do now that we call culinary arts. And it drove me. It drove me to stay in it and to continue to see where it leads. Um, Now, Cato Alexander, who was actually born in New York around 1780, he was born during the time of what we call today the States Acts for a Gradual Abolition of Slavery. Now, some of you know this started around March in Pennsylvania, to where anybody else that was born in enslavement times, during these times of slavery, those children were to be freed. Um, Now, without going into much of an exhaustive historical side of that act, we do know that Cato Alexander around 1810, because of that, he was able to open up his first bar, which was named after himself, called Cato's Tavern. And it was located in a place where we call now Northern Manhattan. Um, and by surprise, he had one of the most elegant, one of the best bars that was in the area, to where this man was even written about when it came to English journalists and writers who would come through America at the time. Cato was known for many things, but some of the cocktails you hear about from him is the milk punch. Milk punch was totally huge during the latter 18th century. His brandy juleps, and yes, juleps were made with brandy or cognac during his time. Um, and also just the service, and his name was renowned. It was around actually Cato has been in operations, and which is still surprising to me, for 48 years. And he did meet some sort of backlash because here's a freed black man at the time, and during a slave era, especially during the 19th century, where chattel slavery really began to pick up speed. So, as you can guess, this man did have that backlash, but nonetheless, he still progressed. Um, he shut down, and it said that he shut down right around where the Civil War began, because he did loan out a lump sum of money, and that wasn't paid back, which is unfortunate. But nonetheless, his legacy lived on, to where you have someone like myself, all the way here in the 21st century, that's sitting and talking about one of the, if not one of the first, he is the first known black bartender here in the United States. Um, so, as a dedication today, I will be talking about the first quintessential cocktail, which is the old fashioned. All right, now, so the old fashioned. The old fashioned is known as a cocktail, and we're not talking about cocktails as far as synonymous with all mixed alcoholic beverages. When we're talking about old fashions in this, or when we're talking about cocktails in this sense, we are talking about spirit, sugar, water, and bitters. Now, the funny thing is that Cato Alexander, who opened up his tavern in 1810, this is right around the time where the old fashioned was created. Um, Now, let's talk about the building blocks of that. When you're making an old fashioned, notice I said spirit, sugar, water, bitters. Now, at that time, that means spirit of any kind. So it could have been Genever, which is the birth of gin, which is what we call Dutch or Belgian gin. It could have been rum, it could have been cognac or brandy that was used for this. But today we're going to be using Uncle Nearest, which in a later time in this month we will talk about Uncle Nearest, which is the Tennessee whiskey that's made by Nathan Green, which was an enslaved African at the time that trained Jack Daniels. But more to come on that later. But so building an old fashioned. Now, I like to use the culinary training that I do have out of Atlanta. And when you see me build, I always start with lemon oil. And lemon oil helps to pull out a lot of those flavors or brighten up the drink a bit. Because back during those times, everything was sweet. Sugar was prominent, obviously, when we talk about sugar cane and what it's done during that time of colonial history. Uh, but of course, our palates have changed at this time. So, still trying to be a purist and sticking to the purity, the absolute truth, and how an old fashioned is made. I still like to add that oil. So I start with lemon oil. After the lemon oil, I'll add in simple syrup. Now, some people like to use granulated sugar. You can still use that, or I'm sorry, or sugar cube. You can still muddle sugar cube, and eventually the sugar does dissolve, and it does give a different characteristic to the drink. But however, to keep it simple today, we utilize simple syrup. So we start with one, the lemon oil. Then I start with, that'll be the rind of a lemon. Then we go for the simple syrup. So here you already have the sugar, right? We'll muddle that together, and then I'll add in the bitters. Now we have the bitters. And the bitters that we use is Angostura. So Angostura bitters, which actually the brand itself, Angostura, is the longest going brand that's here in the Americas. All right, still the same way. All these years later, still using Angostura. Next, we add in Uncle Nearest, which will be about 2 ounces of Uncle Nearest, or 2.5 ounces. It depends on how stiff you like your drink. And then we will add in the ice. Now, the ice is our water element. See, back then, the Hudson Valley Ice Trade just happened. Hudson River Valley Ice Trade, which was in 1806 in New York. So, ice was not readily available at that time. So, using water or using tea was common in cocktails. So, we'll use our ice and then we'll stir. You're going to stir depending on what type of ice you're using, whether it's your common ice that's available in your bar, or it's going to be cold draft, which a lot of craft bars are utilizing now. But either way, I always say give it at least about 40 to 50 resolutions. Why? Because it's going to be poured over ice, so dilution will happen over time. This will help to give your old fashioned a good punch, but mellows out as you mellow out with the drink. All right. So you'll give it a stir, and then after you stir, you'll go ahead and load your glass with fresh ice. And a little touch I like to do is add in lemon oil and orange oil. Those would be your garnishes. You'll do that first, and I call that seasoning your ice. So you season the ice. That way, when you pour in your liquid, then you're incorporating all of those oils into your actual drink. Now, why, Mike, do you use orange and lemon constantly? Well, lemon helps to pull out orange. These are some flavor infinities that everybody should know if you're dealing with these produce every day. In bartending, you're going to deal with lemon, lime, and orange. And even out of those three, lemon and lime are key to all of your cocktails. And then after you do that, it's ready to serve. Serve it up. And then you do it with a smile and you say cheers.